BrainLink. I've heard of it. Good. Okay, so we're a statewide program. I manage the carer programs, so our primary focus is to work with families who are actually caring for someone with an acquired brain injury or neurological disorder. And that's across the state. So, but of course, given funding difficulties, most of our services tend to be in the metropolitan area. We're trying desperately to get more funding to get out more into regional areas, but that's not easy, as a lot of you would know with funding. So our primary focus is carers, also case management with a Slow to Recover program. We have a web page that has lots of resources on it across the state, but as I just mentioned, those sorts of things are changing constantly, and that's what makes having a website with all ABI information on it can be quite difficult. And it's so broad reaching, you know, sort of how far does one website actually go? So that can be a difficulty, you know, with having a website. But it's, you know, certainly something that we should all be looking at as to how we try and bring a lot of information together. Okay, so we do have information and support sessions for families. We have two community liaison workers that work from the Royal Melbourne Hospital and Monash Hospital, who contact or are in contact with families when they're in there, when something happens and they're actually in the hospital with the family member that's either had an accident or a stroke or whatever, however their acquired brain injury has happened. And she works with, or the two ladies work with the families basically to try and give them some information that they can actually take home, because most of them are traumatised by what's happened to their loved one, and so they're not going to take it in initially. But it's a matter of, you know, follow up and all that sort of thing. Our carer getaways are probably our most sought after thing by carers, just to get that respite. They're only 2 days, but they usually come back feeling they've been away for a week. So we do everything for them, and there's no cost to any of our programs. Okay, so why do we actually focus on the carers? Well, carers actually save the taxpayer $40 billion a year with unpaid care. So you can imagine if the person with the disability ended up having to go into care, taxpayers would end up paying a hell of a lot more. Obviously, some families want to actually provide that support and that psychological support and emotional support for their loved one. So therefore, they prefer to have them home as well. That was on our pamper cruise that we did in Carers Week. So all with their bang on a beanies on, so they all had a great time on that. It's sort of more of the social side of things. Education and support. Courses, I guess you'd call them. They can be just one-day things, or they can be over a 4 to 8 week time frame where people come in sort of once a week and go through with different professionals what they're actually needing to know. So that can be anything from having a neuropsych come in to just talk about acquired brain injury, a behavioural psych to come in and talk about how to deal with behaviours that are coming up at home that they're having to deal with, or Centrelink, just what payments they're on, all that sort of thing. Dealing with even grief and loss. How as the people caring for that person, how they actually deal with, they may have, to them, lost their husband or lost their wife or their child purely because they've changed so much. So there's a lot of grieving. It changes behaviours, it changes relationships particularly, and so that's something that they're having to deal with all the time. So things that we go out to, we take people out to, and this applies to also to we have two programs that are for the person with an ABI, and that's the BrainLink group, which is pretty much like a social group really, that they go out once a month to anywhere, all over the place, to Eureka Towers, to the zoo, to the aquarium, have a barbecue somewhere, but it's a social group, so they can actually come with their carer, or they can come with a paid support person, or if they're able to, come on their own. That's fine. So that's the focus on that we have for that. We have another 8-week program that is facilitated by people with an ABI. They've been through a facilitation course, and they focus on basically how it is to live with an ABI and all sorts of things that come up. So other professionals or myself, any staff aren't allowed in it. It's purely for people with an ABI, and it's facilitated by someone or people with an ABI as well. So it's sort of, what happens in that room stays in that room, sort of thing. So they can have a bitch about their mother, or what they have to deal with, or if they're sad, whatever. And they get that support, how to deal with those things from the other people that are in it. They also do a lot of this stuff as well. So it's around the social sort of side of things, the respite, giving their family carer a break, movie days, all those sorts of things, relationships, health and wellbeing days, and of course the carer getaways. Okay, so the BrainLink website can be put into 30 different languages. It tries to link up services across the state in different regions, and it also has different resources that you can access. And if something's not on there, I'd suggest definitely ringing our 1-800 number and asking our information officer what we might be able to sort of get for you, or what you're looking for, and in what part of the state. So, ITAS, speaking across the state, rural areas. Does anyone know what ITAS workers sort of do? They used to be right across the state, including metropolitan. They are no longer metropolitan at all. They're only in the rural regions now. They basically cover sort of all the sorts of things that someone might need to know about acquired brain injury and access to different things. So it stands for information, training and secondary consultation, and that's exactly what they do. I won't go through and sort of read all that, but part of that is, of course, is network meetings. We do have network meetings in metro regions. BrainLink runs one for the eastern region, and that's held at the Nerve Centre in Blackburn. If you would like to be on our mailing list for that, and I've got later on a list of different places, different regions, who runs them in those regions if you're not in the east. But contact me if you'd like to be on our list for those. Okay, so this is where the ITAS projects are. They're in each of the old, I guess they're the old DHS regions. So your Grampians, Hume, Loddon Mallee, Gippsland and Barwon Southwest. If you'd like more information about a particular region, as far as the rural regions go, give me a call and I can sort of give you information and put you on to who's there. Okay, so statewide services for ABI. Obviously, Melbourne City Mission have statewide paediatric services and case management, specialised case management. We've got a couple of people from Melbourne City Mission here, Nicola over there, should be able to help you with that. Obviously Bouverie for therapy, family therapy and things like that. Your Community Brain Disorders Assessment and Treatment Service, CBDATS, that's sort of would be, along with ABI, one of your first stops for public assessments. Advocacy, so Leadership Plus, which we have a couple of people from Leadership Plus, yes, over there. So have a chat to them if you'd like to find out more about that in the breaks. Neurological Assessment, so obviously public, you've got your Monash Health and ABI. For private is Diverge, and of course CBDATS is there as well. Information for carer assistance is specialised in ABI is BrainLink. There is carer supports through Carers Vic, but that is much more generalised, and most of any of our carers who have sort of been to Carers Vic have come away feeling a bit sort of out of it, like not sort of quite accepted in sort of to their general disability area, and not being able to link with people who understand what's happening, with ABI and understand it. So hence they end up coming to us. So I would say we're definitely out there on our own as far as carers go with ABI. Fact sheets, Synapse has some great fact sheets that you can download or contact them, and of course BrainLink. We have all sorts of different fact sheets and information that if you're wanting to know something specifically, there are some resources out on the table as you came in to register. If you want to pick up a brain out there, there's plenty of them, along with different fact sheets and booklets. Okay, so accessing neurological assessment. Usually the big question, isn't it? How do I go about finding a neurological assessment? So obviously there's private neuropsychs. If they're able to cover the cost or pay for an assessment, that's sort of what you could look up APS, their services, and see what they've got there on their website. Statewide, you've got our bias, so travel, if there's travel required, it's free, or cost of travel needs to be covered. Monash Health and Turning Point, so they're all sort of the public free assessment places, and things like your Federation University Psychology Clinic for some cognitive assessments, but not neurological assessments, and not for legal matters. So if you're just wanting to get some cognitive sort of assessment of a client, that's where you would or could access. So this is a bit of a sort of where to start and where it can lead to. I won't sort of go through it word for word or anything, but as you can see, it's starting off with your cognitive issues, some mild issues, and where that ends up going if they become more either moderate or severe, and that's 6% of people who end up with those sorts of difficulties, and where that goes. So obviously a diagnosis is going to help that with being able to get into certain services and even possible compensation if that's depending on what the problem has been. So then getting that diagnosis, so if you need a new assessment for either if it's TAC or work cover, that's been the cause under those places, you'd be able to access them. You need sort of to get old history to make sure that you've got what an assessor might be, how you can access and prove that person needs an assessment. So once you've got a diagnosis, then where do you go? So ABI specific services, and then different funding. There is still some funding around, believe it or not, but with the NDIS, we know that some of that funding is going to dry up or be changed and sort of taken off into the NDIS, sucked into that. Dual Diagnosis Services, CBDATS, RMH, Neuropsychiatry and Turning Point. The network meetings that I was talking about before, these are in 3 different metro regions. Now, Northwest has sort of combined to have the one, and ISIS Primary Care run that for both the West and the Northern region. I don't have a contact person there at the moment because the lady that was running it has left. So, but the number is there if you need sort of to access any network meetings, the ABI specific network meetings. Lee from BrainLink runs the eastern ones, and I'm usually there as well. And Liaise run them down with Dilatin down in the southern region. Okay, about funding. There's some funding in the east called the Flexible Respite funding, and I run that from BrainLink. It's to a maximum of $1,000, and it's primarily, the focus is for the carer. So as far as the funding is concerned, the client is the carer, but the word there is flexible. So it's around what might help to make the carer or the family's life a bit easier by providing something for the person with the disability, so that they're caring for. So that could be equipment for the person with the disability, because that's going to then make the carer's life a bit easier. It may be hoists, or it might be a lift chair or something like that, or rails in the bathroom, anything that's going to help make the family's life a bit easier with the person that they're caring for. Or it can be, that's around equipment, it could be for a respite holiday, for the whole family, including the person with the ABI, to be able to get away. It can be for all sorts of things. So if you've got anything that it can be for personal care or home care that the family aren't sort of able to provide. So yes, if you've got any, that's only in the eastern region. There are other flexible respite funds in other regions, but they often get sort of sucked into other funding. So I know Liaise did have some down in the southern region, but from last I heard it was very limited. You've got your assisted community living, your ACL packages. These are both statewide and metro, and I'm on the the panel that decide sort of who's eligible to get those. That can be up to around about $5,000 over a year, and it's basically focused on keeping someone in the community, being able to live in the community. So the supports that are going to help that. And if you would like to find out more about that, contact Tara Callaway at Melbourne City Mission, because she sort of is the coordinator of those things and when they come out. So if you think that might be something you'd be interested in finding out about for clients, get onto her email list and she will send you out things like when the next funding round is coming up. It's usually twice a year. We usually do one panel in January and one in about August. So if people can't be on an ISP, or if they are on STR, we look very carefully as to how much they're getting with STR, and if they're on a big package, we may look at somebody who isn't on any sort of package and getting absolutely no funding. So we look at all sorts of things when we're going through the panel. The ACL community living packages through our bias, who are also statewide. Madeline Walsh is the lady to contact there. And look, there's some obscure other buckets, little bits and pieces that sometimes come up. But if you're sort of looking for something and looking, I wonder if there'd be funding out there for this person, and also age comes into it too. Some of these fundings, like the flexible respite funding, is the carer can't be over 65. But then there's some other older carer funding things with Urella, where the carer can be over 65, but the person they're caring for has to be under 60. So there's all sorts of criteria. If you've got any queries about any sort of funding buckets that you might be able to sort of access for something, just give me a call. That's probably the easiest way to go, because every single situation is going to be different. Okay, these are some of the BrainLink resources that are available, and some of those are out on the table there, so please help yourself to them. If there's something that's not there that you'd like to see if we've got, talk to me later and I'll let you know, or give us a call. There's some of the other booklets. Some of them can be found online on our website in other languages. So, if you're not sure, also give me a call. Okay, so there's the give me a call phone numbers. And that's about it, I think. I'll leave that up there. Any questions?
So I'm Laura. I'm a neuropsychologist from a private clinic called Germain Health, and I just wanted more of a comment than a question about sort of accessing neuropsych services in terms of an assessment to provide an actual diagnosis. So obviously private clinics are a lot more expensive, but there's sort of like, if you get a bit crafty and creative, there's often lots of ways that you can access the funding to help towards a neuropsych assessment, which then, if you've got that actual proper diagnosis and then a sort of a treatment plan or recommendations, it can sometimes open up a lot of other pathways and things like that. So like, for example, it's very rare, most people in this room wouldn't get to someone at this early stage, but you can get Vic Legal Aid can fund neuropsych assessments if for an offender that's going to trial or for sentencing, or even for sort of the community justice centres and things like that. There's sort of a bucket of funding in there.
Great.
It's very small. You've got to have quite a sort of convincing case, but there's those sorts of things there. And I think a lot of people, one of the things I think is that we need to, I know everyone here does, but we need to really sort of keep pushing and asking and even though, there's lots of no's and that there's no funding, but we need to keep asking for the funding to show, rather than just giving up and going, I'll just do something else. Yeah. Because if we just keep asking, hopefully eventually we might sort of have more sort of a push and more evidence for why we need the funding. And another avenue is that lots of the universities have psychology clinics where they offer a neuropsych assessment at a reduced rate for a few $100s. But that one can't be used, obviously, in legal settings, but often good if you want just an idea of strengths and weaknesses or some help with treatment planning and things like that. The psychology schools at the unis are often a good avenue to go down. Yeah.
Excellent, thanks. Thanks for that.
I don't know whether this is the right time today to ask this question, but I'll do it now just in case it doesn't come again. Lawyers, especially barristers, do work for free. You might have heard pro bono legal services, and often that's sort of the last resort where legal aid won't fund them because they're not going to jail, and it sort of eventually may find someone to do it free, may not. If you are a barrister and you are very concerned that your client has an ABI, short of paying money yourself, it's highly unlikely that you'll get any money to pay for an assessment. And my question is, and you don't have to answer immediately, is do you or people you know, or neuropsychologists specifically, or people with money who can pay for neuropsychologists, is there a way that we can get a system where reduced fee or even free assessments can be obtained when a person may be able to get a much reduced sentence or even found not guilty if they had a neuropsych assessment that I could put forward either formally or informally to my colleagues so that we could do something about it when it gets to our side of the fence.
I don't know all the answer, but I'll start the answer. It's really awkward, and it depends on whereabouts you're based. So I think one of the themes coming out of this is that you can't remember all this stuff, but you need a starting point. So if you don't know where else to start, at least ring BrainLink for a start. If you're in a regional area, contact the ITASC workers. These people have their finger on the pulse in the regions for what money's around and who's doing what kinds of assessments and how to get whatever you can get your hands on. Or if you're in the metro region, those other ones that Karen pointed out as being networks to be in touch with. You can't know all the answers, but they will. And then I think if you're looking for a neuropsych assessment, if you have money, you contact the privates, and asking around will quickly get you onto a list of privates, or using the Australian Psychological Society Find a Neuropsychologist search engine. Then the other idea was the university clinics, for example. So what we have, La Trobe's got one at Bias, and Monash has got one, Melbourne University also. And then there are these other small obscure things, like if somebody's a specific sexual offender, then there is a bucket of money over in that justice area to get assessments for those people. Other ideas?
Not that this is going to help in the immediate sort of short term, but there is, and there has been for some time, a push to get neuropsychology covered under Medicare, because it's not, or at the moment, it's not covered by really any private health insurance companies either. And I think that there might actually be, I know there's something going around, and I'm not sure if it is appropriate for sort of referring services or if it's more so for clients that have engaged in neuropsychology services already. But it's under the College of Clinical Neuropsychology. It's sort of like a questionnaire that they want to get filled out by as many people as possible to send to Medicare as sort of adding to that evidence that there is a need for Medicare to cover it. So I might look into that perhaps, and I might be able to contact you, and if it is something that potential referrers can fill out to send to Medicare, it might be worthwhile to sort of send it around to a mailing list, and perhaps that can, be another another bulk of evidence we can send through to Medicare to help make these services more accessible to everyone.
I'd add too, one of the unfortunate things that we've seen, you might have noticed in that list of our ITASC reps, these people run monthly meetings, a source of information in the regions, and it's the kind of place you would call if you were in that area and say, where can I get funding to do such a thing? One of the things that's occurred because of the NDIS, the Barwon Southwest used to have a neuropsych assessment clinic. They were free. Public service used to knock over 50 assessments a year, and was a really helpful thing, and that was part of one of the ITASC projects. The NDIS sort of have taken the money and absorbed that, so the clinic shut down. Unfortunately, people now can't get those public assessments, which would be their eligibility criteria met for getting services through the NDIS. So to me, that's a problem, but it's also part of the solution. To me, the NDIS needs to have some capacity to be funding assessments. Otherwise, they're basically saying, we've got a bucket of resources here to help you, but we're not going to let you come in because we won't let you get a diagnosis. So if a diagnosis is necessary, to me, they've got to be part of the assessment solution as well. So I think that's like Medicare. It's another one of those leverage points. This issue has come up in every one of these workshops, that it's just so hard for people to get it. And I think the other part is too, like in the prisons, we had an ABI clinician who was doing screening and intervention work without trying to assess everybody. I think we need a solution that's based not just on assessing everybody as well, because we'll never be able to fund it. Yeah, so there's, I think, multiple levers. So maybe it's Medicare and NDIS.
Okay. Any other questions or? Yep.
What percentage do you think of participants would have had contact with the justice system? Because I sense in the people that I work with that if you've had justice contact, they're less likely to engage in more mainstream disability support programs and services.
Yeah, look, there would be a smattering of people who have had contact with criminal justice services. I think probably because the programs are specific to ABI, often they feel more comfortable in actually coming and participating in those, because they know that they're going to be understood, sort of thing. And if they don't turn up, sometimes that's okay, but they're really encouraged to keep coming. And it's actually quite amazing, the retention rate, particularly with the Life Moves program, which is the 8-week program. They've had a really good retention rate as far as people continuing right through. Occasionally things will come up, obviously health issues or whatever, but yeah, we've had a pretty good sort of rate of keeping people there. Yeah. And the social group is really, it gets booked out every month. So, but and the more people are starting to know about it, the more people obviously we're having call up and wanting to go on these outings and things. And as I said, once again, they're specific to ABI people. So, and they can bring a carer with them if they need that.
Thanks, Karen.